Okay.
Test the mics.
Test. Hello. Is this good? Hi, everyone. Okay, brilliant. This is so exciting. Welcome, everyone. It's really lovely to see so many faces and so many like friendly faces and people that we know and just, yeah, our community. It's really, really wonderful. I'm Jess. I work for Lighthouse, and it's an absolute pleasure to welcome you all to this year's Book Fringe. It has started. Woo! Woo! So the Book Fringe is a free community-led book festival. It is being run this year, like last year, by Lighthouse, Argonauts, and Typewriter down in Leith. So I should say that if you have no plans after this, then you should definitely make your way down to Leith to go to the second event of the Book Fringe, which is Leah Hazard and Shikha Ramaswamy at Argonauts Books. God, is it Argonauts? Is it Typewriter? This happens when you program Book Fringe. We're opening the Book Fringe with a very, very special event, which I've been looking forward to for a long time. This is going to happen in kind of two halves, really. So first, we're going to have Grace tell you a little bit about her new book, Vulture Capitalism. And then I'm going to join Grace and we're going to have a wee discussion to open it up a little bit. And then there will be questions from the audience. So definitely, as you hear us talking, if there are things that coming up, make a mental note and there will be time for that. I suspect that many of you already know a little bit about Grace, but I am going to introduce you anyway. Grace Blakeley is a staff writer at Tribune magazine and author of Stolen: How to Save the World from Financialization and the Corona Crash. She previously worked as a research fellow for the Institute of Public Policy Research and as a New Statesman's economic commentator. She appears regularly in the media as a political and economic commentator, including appearances on Question Time, BBC This Week, and BBC Breakfast. Her latest book is called Vulture Capitalism. It's right there. There will be signing afterwards. Please join me in welcoming Grace Blakeley.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. My time in Edinburgh amongst such a kind of friendly and lovely community. So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about my book, Vulture Capitalism, and really a question that led me to write this book was this question of why people feel so powerless under most capitalist societies. Why does change seem so hard? And why in particular have many of the kind of, ordinary ways that we might think about changing the system through government regulation, through kind of ethical consumption, through kind of guidelines around how businesses should be run, by trying to change the structure of capitalism. Why has that not worked? And in writing Vulture Capitalism, I kind of wanted to challenge some of the kind of assumptions and ideas that most people have about what capitalism is, and equally what socialism is, and to kind of answer that question from that perspective. So the motivation, I suppose, for this book started in the wake of the 2019 general election loss. I had been very involved in kind of campaigning for Jeremy Corbyn. I was kind of very depressed, verging on catatonic, and then the pandemic kicked in, and suddenly we were all confined to our homes, and I was being wheeled out on programs like Good Morning Britain and whatever else to talk about what was going on in the economy. And one of the questions I kept getting asked was, the Conservative government is now spending loads of money in the economy. It's propping up businesses. It's spending all this money on the furlough scheme. We've now got this huge government. It's almost like Jeremy Corbyn won the 2019 election. You got exactly what you wanted, didn't you? Because this government's spending all this money. That's just socialism, isn't it? And the more I was asked this question, and the more I kind of confronted this perspective, which was pretty readily available at that time, I realized there was this like fundamental misunderstanding for most people about what capitalism actually is, and that misunderstanding went back a really long time. So most people think that capitalism means kind of free markets, a free market system based on kind of competition, the equilibration of resources through supply and demand. They wouldn't use those kinds of words, but basically it's a kind of market system. And if you have freer markets, you have more capitalism. On the other hand, they probably also say that socialism is when the government does everything. You have a big state and therefore a more constrained operation of the market. So, less market, more state equals more socialism. More market, less state equals more capitalism. And that was where this confusion had come from about, it was almost like Jeremy Corbyn won the 2019 election because Boris Johnson was spending loads of money to prop up the economy. And that kind of mythology can be traced back a very long time. You can trace it back through to obviously the Cold War, when you had, the kind of centrally planned USSR version of socialism versus the miracle of American free market capitalism as these two kind of distinct entities. But it kind of goes back even before then to these debates that were taking place at the beginning of the 20th century between an economist that I talk about a lot in the book, Hayek, who was the kind of one of the real central leaders of what became known as the neoliberal movement, and Keynes, who was the champion of what we now know as kind of the Keynesian consensus social democracy. And his view was that after the Wall Street crash, capitalism had become very irrational. It needed to be tamed. It needed to be regulated. You needed a state staffed by kind of benevolent, wise technocrats who could tame the ups and downs of the market to make capitalism work effectively. And that kind of became the default way of organizing the economy, particularly after the Second World War, for a lot of different reasons, but at least partly because the labor movement and the left came to champion that idea that we would have this kind of, social democratic capitalism based on consensus and the technical management of the economy. Now, Hayek comes in and says, that's not going to work, basically, because of these social democratic reforms, because of the creation of the NHS, because of regulation around the economy. All of these things are making the state too big, and they're leading us down the road to serfdom, as he called it. And as these kind of experiments in social democracy wore on, alongside the development of socialism in other parts of the world, the argument came to be that if you carry on championing these social democratic reforms, eventually you'll get a state so big and so powerful that it takes over all areas of economic life. It crushes the spirit of the market, and in doing so, it crushes the autonomy and the dignity of the individual. And then the USSR was held up as an example of how that would happen. And this argument was really the cornerstone, the reforms that we started to see in the 1980s when that social democratic consensus was swept away. And so the argument upon which that was based was, capitalism gives us freedom. It respects the freedom and the autonomy of the individual. To get more capitalism, we need less state. And to do that, we need privatization and cuts to spending and cuts to taxes. And this argument was very compelling to a lot of people, for a lot of different reasons. And it ended up being basically a barefaced lie, because neoliberalism didn't give us a smaller state. The state wasn't really rolled back so much as it was captured and then used by a different set of interests to pursue a different set of policies. We had and we still have a very active state that pursues very vigorously policies to support the interests of capital, whether that is massive subsidies for the banks or for big businesses when the economy is under threat, whether that's regulation in service of the interests of those corporations, whether it's jailing protesters or forcefully clamping down upon any threat to the interests of capital. The state, the capitalist state, is very, very strong for some and very, very weak for others. It hasn't shrunk. We haven't got more and less state just because we had neoliberal reforms. We've got this forceful state that acts in service of a different set of interests, service of the interests of capital. And it is now raining. I'm so sorry, guys. Does anyone want a blanket? Because there are two here. No? Are you sure? Okay, actually, okay. Well, hopefully it will calm down. So, neoliberalism doesn't mean a smaller state, and equally, it doesn't mean freer markets. So, we're told that this is the kind of apex of the capitalist. Oh no! It's every time I say capitalism, it seems to rain a bit more. Is that a coincidence? Anyway, I will try and can everyone get under a brolly or a coat or something? Oh, right. Okay. Maybe we can move back to under the trees, or I don't know. Did not expect this at all.
No, we're Edinburgh weather.
The problem is we had a gazebo, but it would have flown away.
It would have flown away.
Windy. Oh God, is everyone okay if we carry on? If you want to go stand back underneath the trees or something, or maybe perch in the doorway, feel free to do so. There we go. Okay, right. I'll try, and then we can see where we get to with the rain. So we don't have a small state. We don't have freer markets. We have markets that are monopolized by a set of vested interests and dominated by a number of massive multinational corporations that really operate internally according to principles completely different from those of the free market, according to principles of hierarchy, domination, control. If you're at the top, you get to tell everyone else what to do. And if you're at the bottom, you simply have to take orders. Kind of the exact model that we were told we would get if you continue down the road of having these social democratic reforms. And equally we have a state that is becoming more authoritarian. And is also, we were told we would get an authoritarian state and a state that was very inefficient, that it wouldn't be able to make very good decisions, that it would become corrupt because there'd be too many vested interests, i.e. workers, having an influence over what was going on there. And yet now we have a state that is making incredibly unwise and inefficient decisions in the interests of those at the top. A state that, for example, we had the combination of austerity, massive cuts to public services, and then extremely loose monetary policy, i.e. the government pumping tons and tons of money into the economy to boost the profit finance sector, whilst the real economy was completely screwed over. This was the de facto economic policy for the 10 years after the financial crisis, and it basically wrecked the entire economy. It was really inefficient, but it made some people very wealthy. And there are a number of examples in the book I kind of used to illustrate this point about what you see in terms of how actually existing capitalist societies work. You don't see a beautiful, lovely free market full of, equal producers and consumers competing against one another, with a state standing at arm's length from that market, regulating it in the best interest of society. You see a toxic fusion of public and private power in service of the maintenance of the status quo. In other words, not free markets, not a small state, a corrupt oligarchic system that works to promote the interests of those at the top. It's really hammering it down now, isn't it?
The other option is we can move it inside.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go inside. I don't want to berate you about